Hey there guys, it's me, the Mustard Oligarch, and I'm going to give you today a quick rundown of the very basics of Crusader Kings 2. Now, to say that this game is deep and pretty complicated would be the understatement of the century. Even after 400 hours of gameplay, I'm still constantly finding new things to try out and enjoy, and I've barely yet scratched the surface of the game. You know that there's a lot to explore in the game when 400 hours of gameplay is actually considered quite a small amount of gameplay by the community at large. So we're going to be very lightly touching on a couple of the basics just to get you guys started in this game. We're going to be starting off at the 1066 start date. This is where most players will be starting off if you don't have the DLC. This is the earliest start date which you can start at. It's a very important start date historically, as it's when England was conquered by William the Conqueror. So we're going to click on Custom Game Setup. So the most unusual thing with this game compared to other grand strategy games is the fact that you don't actually truly play as a country, but rather as a person, rather than as a country as a whole. Unlike something like Europa Universalis or a Total War game, you're not playing as a country. You're playing as an individual person. So if we click on, say, Scotland, so rather than playing as Scotland itself, you'll be playing as the King of Scotland. So that's King Malcolm of Scotland. He is 27 years old and he rules from the county of Gowrie. Now this is something that catches a lot of people off guard when they first start playing, is they want to play as Scotland, but truly you don't actually play as Scotland, you play as the ruler of Scotland. But there are many different tiers of rulership in a country. That's something we'll get onto at a later point. But we'll just start off by playing as the King of Scotland. You have all your regular sort of setup stuff for creating the game. These can all be changed when you start up a game. They cover all sorts of different things, from when the Mongols invade, to whether or not women have equal rights, to things like diplomatic range. So whether or not, say if you're ruling from Scotland, whether or not you'll be able to interact with someone all the way over in India, which naturally would usually not happen, but you can increase your diplomatic range to be able to interact with people that far away, although that probably isn't recommended for earlier playthroughs. But if you're playing with friends, maybe you'll want to be ruling from different parts of the world, so maybe you would want that in that situation. I must apologise, by the way, at this point in time for any audio difficulties. It is currently a very, very hot day here in sunny old Wales. So I've got my fan on, and I'm pretty certain you'll be able to hear that, so I must apologise up front about that. I'll try to do my best to do some sound cancelling, but there's only so much you can do. I must apologise. So, you get a starting welcome message, just to introduce you to some of the basics of the game. There is a tutorial in Crusader Kings 2, although I personally would say it's a little bit jank. It's not ideal. It's not an ideal tutorial. I think it could definitely do with some work, but I think that's just one of those things that comes from it being such a deeply complicated game with so many different moving parts. It is difficult to make a tutorial for that sort of game. So this gives you a rundown for what you, as your character, based on your religion, your government type, and your culture, can do. So, due to the fact that we're Scottish, we have a unique succession type, Tanistry. We will talk about the succession in a little bit. Now, we'll talk very briefly on your government type. So government types come in many different shapes and sizes. The most common type that you'll probably be playing as is a feudal lord. So this is when you own a castle, you're generally speaking something like a king or a duke. That's a feudal lord. So you'll have access to castles, forts, and hospitals. So a castle is the thing that you'll mostly be working with. Forts and hospitals are sort of like special holdings, which we'll get onto at a later point. You can also hold tribal holdings, providing that they're of your culture. But again, we'll get onto that in a little bit. So, your character. This is perhaps the most important thing with regards to Crusader Kings, as who your character is will determine what you can do with regarding ruling a country and how well your character will govern it. So to find out more about your character, click on your portrait in the top left hand corner with this handsome Scottish man, King Malcolm III. So, as you see, lots of information to take in here right away. But I'll try my best to talk my way through things as best as I can. So obviously, this is your character himself. This is your portrait. Next to your portrait is your spouse. Obviously, if you're a queen, it will be a man that you marry. If you're a man, it's a woman that you marry. Needless to say, the Middle Ages not so keen on the old homosexuality thing, but you know, whatever. So these are the two main portraits that you'll have with regards to your ruler. In addition to this, we'll show you your heir. So your heir is who will take over your lands when your ruler dies. In addition to that, your heir is who you will be playing as. Now, things get a little bit more complicated if you hold multiple titles. That can all get divided up, but again, we'll get on that in a little bit. You have 5 predominant stats that govern how your character will act and how good they are at doing things. You have diplomacy, marshal, stewardship, intrigue, and learning. All of them govern different parts of your rulership. Diplomacy covers your interactions with people in your own realm, along with other nations and rulers out there. It will cover things like their opinion of you, along with how many direct vassals you can have. A vassal is effectively a lord who is one tier below you, one or more tiers below you, and they'll pay you troops and money in return for you basically protecting them if they get war declared on them. So you're their boss, effectively. Marshal governs your ability to command troops. So if you are on the battlefield commanding an army, it is your marshal that determines how sort of good of a general you are. It will also affect how many troops you can raise in times of war. Generally speaking, the higher your marshal, the more troops you'll be able to lead, and the better you'll be able to lead them. Stewardship is your ability to govern finances. So the higher your stewardship, the more taxes you'll get out of a region. Along with that, the higher your stewardship, the more land you'll be able to directly govern. This is known as your demesne. This is shown in the top right hand corner. A single holding, such as a county or a barony, counts towards this total of your demesne. Your demesne can account for any one of the 3 holding types, be it either a castle, 4 holding types, my apologies, be either a castle, a church, a town, or a tribe. Generally speaking, at the later points in the game, you will predominantly just be handling 3 types of holdings. Holding is effectively just an area, an area within an area. So we're going to get onto that in a little bit. We'll get more into detail, but generally speaking, the higher your stewardship, the more money you'll be making, and the more stuff you can own. Intrigue is your ability to detect plots against you. So, say people who are planning to murder you, or people who are planning on murdering other people, that sort of thing. It also affects your ability to plot against people. So, say if you want to have someone off, if you want to nick some of their land, that sort of thing. We'll get onto plots in a little bit, but Intrigue governs that sort of stuff. And finally, there's learning. Now, learning is a stat that predominantly only really governs your ability to gain technology points. So generally speaking, the higher your learning skill, the faster which you'll gain technology. It also governs things like your ability to be a physician, but that's more of an NPC thing rather than your own personal character. Okay. Now that we've talked about the basic stats, there are a couple of other stats here that we're going to talk about. Your demesne is something that we've talked about previously. It is your personal holdings, so that's all the stuff that you own. Below that is your vassal limit. So that shows how many direct rulers you have underneath you. So that includes counts and dukes, because of the fact that we're a kingdom. When it comes to your actual rulership, there are, generally speaking, 4 tiers of ruler that you as a player can be. There is a count, so this is a ruler of a county. A county is one single area, such as Gowrie here, which our lovely Malcolm is ruling in. Now, if we click on a county, you can see that there is the county itself, the county of Scone, that's the capital. There are a number of smaller holdings below this called baronies. Now, generally speaking, you can hold these, but they will never be your primary title. Okay? You will always be ruling at least a county. With a couple of very small exceptions, but we'll assume, generally speaking, that if you're a feudal ruler, you'll be ruling from a county. Above a county is a duchy. So a duchy is effectively a collection of counties. So right here we have a duke that's under us. That is the Duke of Moray. So as you can see, he rules over Moray and Ross. Now in this situation he actually owns both of these. He is the Count of both Ross and Moray. But he is also the Duke of Moray. He owns the duchy. You can own multiple counties and not have to be the Duke of them. But usually it will be the case that if you own a large number of counties in a certain area, you will also probably end up being the Duke of them in the end. Going back onto our character. Oh no, my apologies. But above a Duke, you'll have a kingdom. So this is what we are. We are the King of Scotland. The Duchy of Moray is ruled by the King of Scotland. So the king has absolute power over a duke. Now there is one title higher than a king, and that's an emperor. Now emperors hold an unbelievable amount of power. They usually have a vast number of vassals, will quite often hold a large amount of land, and will have a vast number of troops at their disposal to wipe out anyone who dares oppose them. At this point in the game, in Western Europe, there are 2 emperors in the game. There is the Holy Roman Empire, ruled currently by Kaiser Heinrich IV, and the Byzantine Empire, which is the Eastern Roman Empire, ruled by Basilius Constantius X of the Byzantine Empire. Now, an emperor holds a vast amount of land. To put it into context, if I click on the Realms button here, you can more clearly see the borders between nations. Scotland, as you can see, is relatively small in comparison to something like the Holy Roman Empire, which, to put it bluntly, is fucking massive. The same can be said about the Byzantine Empire. It is a vast, vast amount of land. An empire is usually made up of multiple kingdoms, all ruled over by an emperor. So that covers your vassals. Next is your number of troops that you have at your disposal. So this is based on the amount of troops that you yourself can raise to your name in a time of war, along with that of your vassals, what they will be able to contribute towards you in times of war, if you need to command their troops. Below that is your wealth. This covers how much money that you have, along with your monthly income. Money is, of course, used for, well, making everything happen. You use money to build buildings, build entirely new holdings, such as a new castle or even a new town, something like that. But it's also used for paying your troops. When you raise troops in times of war, you will need to pay them. This also goes towards mercenaries. Mercenaries, you need to pay, obviously, because they're mercenaries. They will fight for you so long as you have the money for it. Wealth is unbelievably important in Crusader Kings. Everything can be done with wealth. Be it being able to raise troops, build buildings, or even buy support from your rulers. Say with example of our lovely Duke of Moray. He doesn't really like us that much, but potentially we could send him a gift to make him like us a little bit more. So we can spend 75 of our money to increase his opinion of us by 20. Now that varies depending on person to person, the amount of money that you'll need to spend, and the amount of loyalty that you gain from it depends on the person. But generally speaking, the more money you have, the better. Below that is your prestige. Now this is just really how much sort of amazing stuff your character's done. You know, how much sort of fame that they have. The higher your prestige, the better. Prestige can be spent as a currency in certain situations, but predominantly it's used to improve your diplomacy. Generally speaking, the higher your prestige, the better. You'll get better relations with people as a result. Finally, below that is your piety. The piety is your sort of religious fame. It indicates how devoted of a religious man or woman you are, and will, generally speaking, govern your relations with religious figures. The higher your piety, the stronger of a religious tie you will have to your religious vassals and with other religious people. The higher your piety, the better. So that covers all of your basic stats. But there are a couple of other things I'm sure that you can see here. These are your traits. Now, traits affect all of your stats. So one thing that everyone will have is effectively an education. An education is what your character was trained as they were raised as a child. In this situation, Malcolm here is a cleric. So, due to his upbringing, he has a slightly lower intrigue and a higher learning. There are 4 tiers of training for each of the different stats. In this case, I have a learning education, but it's only a level 2 education. This isn't too great. The higher levels of education usually give you much, much better boons with very few drawbacks. Whereas you can see that I still do have that -1 in intrigue. Generally speaking, if you have like a level 4 education, you still have that -1, but you have a much, much higher bonus. So say you'll have a +9 to your learning rather than a +3, if I'm correct, if memory serves. So there's a number of other traits we have here. All of them will affect different things. It's all good. Those are what traits are. They'll just basically be stat bumps and can affect people in other ways. So say Gregarious increases your vassal's opinion of you by 5. That's really good. It means that your vassals will be slightly more loyal towards you. That's really, really good. Down here, you can see what titles you own. So, As you can see, we own the County of Gowrie and the Kingdom of Scotland. The highest level of title is shown on the left, the lowest level title is shown on the right. Below that are your claims. So potentially you might have, say, a claim to, say, the Kingdom of England, let's say. We don't have that right now, but as the game goes on, you will doubtlessly acquire claims, and you can press these through war, or potentially even through diplomacy if you play your cards right. Claims can usually be inherited by your children, so if you don't press a claim as your character now, potentially your children will be able to in the future. Okay, so those are the basics of your character stats done. We're already 21 minutes in, and we've barely got past the first stage of this introduction. As you can see, this game is remarkably deep, and perhaps I'm not doing my best job of explaining things. I've doubtlessly missed a huge amount of information. I've already seen a small amount of information I've missed now. Things like your religion. Your religion shown to your right hand corner. But yeah, that's your basics of your character. That's all you'll really need to know straight away. Arguably the most important thing with ruling your nation is your council. Council can be shown in the top left hand corner here. You have a big old toolbar here on the top of your screen. If you click on your council, it'll indicate who is in your council and what jobs they can do for you. Now, depending on your culture and your religious group, these names will change, but they'll all do the same sort of job. You have a chancellor, a marshal, a steward, a spymaster, and a chaplain. Chancellor is basically your head diplomat. They can, generally speaking, make sure that the wheels of your empire run smoothly, diplomatically. They can do a number of different jobs for you. Generally speaking, they'll focus on either keeping the peace or sowing a bit of discourse in another nation. One of the most important things that a chancellor can do is Fabricated Claim. Now, a fabricated claim allows you to gain a claim on another bit of land. So say we'll be able to fabricate a claim here on the province of Argyll. Now, we don't own Argyll, but if we set our chancellor to fabricate claims there is a 24.33% chance yearly that he will get us a claim on that land. Now, it will cost us money and a bit of prestige to buy that claim once he's fabricated it, but we'll be able to then press a war over it. He is a vassal of the King of the Isles, Surya, but we'll be able to go to war with that if we have that claim. That's really, really important. Your Marshal is effectively your head general, your big head honcho when it comes to your military. Now, he'll cover things like your ability to raise troops, train your generals, that sort of thing. One of the most important things that I find early game is your ability to train troops. This can basically just increase the rate at which troops will replenish after they've died, and will also increase your maximum number of troops. Really, really important if you want to get a large army at the start of a war, or if a war starts to drag on, your ability to replenish that army. You can only set your councillors to do one job at a time and in one county at a time, unless they're on the far left here. These far left jobs can pretty much be done anywhere. They're not actually assigned to a particular region. So like when we fabricated claim that set our chancellor to go to Argyll, if we wanted to train troops, we could set him to go to Gowrie. Now he's only training troops in Gowrie. If we owned multiple provinces, it wouldn't affect other provinces other than Gowrie. Okay. Thirdly, we have your steward. This is your money man. He's the man that's in charge of you getting shitloads of cash. By default, he'll be set to just be trying to improve your provinces and trying to convert provinces to your culture. Improving your provinces will generally involve reductions in building costs, along with increase in prosperity. Prosperity increases things like your taxes, troop replenishment rate, but the higher your prosperity, the more susceptible you are to diseases. But we'll get onto disease and things in a little bit. We have your spy master. This is your chief intriguer. Generally speaking, unlike your other positions of power on your council, your spymaster is the one that you want to keep happiest. Because a spymaster that's disloyal to you will likely want to kill you, or can be very easily persuaded to have you offed. That's not fun. So you want to keep your spymaster loyal to you, particularly if he's very, very good at his job. If you do not have a spymaster, you cannot detect plots made against you. This obviously isn't good. So you'll want to have your spymaster ideally be skilled and loyal to you. They can do a number of different tasks, but predominantly you'll want them to be scheming to detect plots made against you, or plots in general in your nation. That's quite important. And finally, you have your court chaplain. This is your head religious honcho. They'll go around, finding heretics and, ordering them to be burnt at the stake, that sort of thing. They can prolicize, so that's converting provinces to your religion, along with individual people. And you can improve relations, so you can send your chaplain to, say, Rome to improve your relations with the Pope, if you're a Catholic. Or, whatever religious group you are, whoever your religious head is. So that covers your main council. In addition to this, you'll have a number of minor titles. A lot of these are just here to improve relations with people, but generally speaking, they'll cost money. So it will cost you money to give out these titles. They're usually quite cheap, but they'll give you a small relation improvement with your vassals. The more interesting minor titles on this list, things like your designated region. If you, for some reason, are not able to rule, say if your ruler goes into hiding, or if you go on a pilgrimage, or if, quite simply, you just become old and infirm and aren't able to rule anymore, then your regent will take control for you. You want this regent to be loyal to you, and ideally have good stats. It's quite often for people to make their queen their vassal, due to the fact that you'll often have quite good relations. In this situation, I don't have good relations with my queen, but her stats are pretty good. She has a 17 in Stewardship. That is very, very good. So I would likely make her my regent. So she would rule in my set if I can't. You have your court position. This is another very important position that you'll want to be filled. If you or any of your family members get sick, you can call upon your court physician to take care of you, give you medical treatment. Now, at the moment, I don't have any valid candidates, so I'd probably need to hire one from abroad. That'll be a decision I can take later on. But generally speaking, you always want to have a court physician, because you never know when you're going to accidentally poop yourself to death. And yes, that is a thing that can happen. You can get diarrhea and just die. It's great. Crusader Kings. Arguably, though, arguably the minor title that you'll be changing the most is your commander. You can have a number of commanders. These vary depending on what government rank you are. If you're a king in this situation, we have 6 commanders. If you're a count, I believe you can only have 2 commanders. If you're a duke, 4. And an emperor, I think, gets either 8 or 10 commanders. I can't remember off the top of my head, I'm afraid. Generally speaking, you want these guys to have high martial skill so that they can command your armies effectively. Each army, generally speaking, will have 3 commander slots, 1 for each of the flanks of the army. There'll be a centre, a left, and a right flank of your army. Certain commanders will get traits which will make them better at doing different things, such as being able to lead cavalry better, or being better at leading a flank. So that's effectively your council and your minor roles covered. Next we'll talk about laws and the inheritance. So, arguably the most important law in your land is, who will inherit after you. Right now, we are an agnatic, kinatic, primogenitor inheritance system. So this means that the eldest child will inherit. I have 3 sons. I have Prince Duncan, Prince Donald, and Prince Malcolm. The eldest child will inherit all of my stuff. The other children will not get them. Now, this can cause problems down the line and potential rivalries between your children. Naturally, this will make your heir, your eldest child, very, very happy. Make them very happy with you because of the fact that you're giving them all your stuff. It will make your other children pissed. They will not be happy with you. So they might even try to kill the eldest child to get themselves in the position of inheritance. Or they might even end up leading a rebellion against you. They might try and, after the inheritance, after Malcolm III dies, they might try and rise up in revolt to try and put themselves as the King of Scotland. That's what the succession brings. There are many different laws that can be changed after a certain period of rulership. I think it's after 10 years you can change the succession law. There are also different kinds of succession. Depending on your government type, you might have certain things restricted to you. Say if you're a tribal government, you will not have access to anything except for gavelkind, if I'm correct. Now, gavelkind is a government type where your land is divided up between all of your children. Whilst it sounds really good on paper, it does effectively mean that your land is shattered every single time that an inheritance happens. Every time your ruler dies, everything that you've worked for is split up between 3 children rather than just the one. This can ultimately weaken the crown over a number of successions. The upshot of having a gavelkind succession is that you get an increase in your demesne. I think you get a 30% increase. So in our current position, that would give us an extra bit of land. Now, having that extra 1 or 2 provinces can actually make a huge deal of difference. If, say, I was squaring up against the King of England, and he had 3 provinces under his direct control, and I had 5, that would make a massive difference in the number of direct troops I'll be able to raise, and direct taxes I'll be able to have to afford more troops and more mercenaries, along with being able to potentially bribe rulers in his land. But, of course, when it comes to the actual succession, your land will get absolutely devastated. Okay. So that's the inheritance. That it covers the succession type. Gender laws determine whether women have rights to inherit. We are an agnatic kinatic succession type. So that means that women can inherit, provided that there are no eligible men to inherit in this situation. So say at this point in time I have 3 sons. If I had a daughter that was older than Duncan, because of the fact that we're an agnatic kinatic succession type, she would not have right to inherit because of the fact that there's a male heir. Let's say I had 3 daughters, or 5 daughters, hell, and I had 1 son. None of those daughters would have eligibility to inherit because of the fact that I have 1 son. In agnatic kinatic succession, men always inherit over women, and it's only when men aren't eligible for succession that women will be able to inherit. That's the only time that they'll be able to inherit under these circumstances. There are some culture types that allow for absolute kinatic succession. That means that women inherit on the same terms as men, but most of the time it'll either be agnatic kinatic, so men inheriting over women, or absolute agnatic, meaning that women do not inherit land at all. Generally speaking, that will be the situation in most of Western Europe. It can get a little. There are certain culture groups, like things like the Basque cultures, which allow women to inherit, along with certain religious groups that allow women to inherit. So, if I'm correct, the Cathar heresy will allow you to have an absolute kinatic succession type. But then again, if you're going to be a Cathar heretic, you're going to have a lot more problems on your hand than a succession. You'll have issues of everyone wanting to declare a holy war on you and your nearby neighbours. But sometimes that's worth the risk if you want to keep your succession secure, is becoming a heretic. Okay, so that covers the inheritance laws. We're going to briefly touch now on different laws in your lands There are all sorts of different things that you can change. Crown laws, you can only change one crown law per ruler, if I'm correct. Whereas other laws you can change every 10 years. You can only change one law every 10 years, one crown law per ruler. Crown laws, generally speaking, are much more powerful, but of course you can only change them once per ruler. At the moment we only have the ability to change 2 of these crown laws, either the investiture, so that's a Catholic rule, depending on who gets to become a bishop, who gets to be appointed. Free investiture gives you the ability to have bishops elected who are loyal to you, whereas papal investiture, generally speaking, will have bishops appointed who are loyal to the Pope, but it will improve your relations with the Pope himself and give you a bit of extra piety. Your legal system governs like different like increases to your demesne, along with relations with different factions in your group, in your kingdom. Sorry. But yeah, there are a number of different laws here. A lot of the time you will have to get them passed by your council before you can actually put them into effect. You'll need to make sure that the council is on your side before you try and pass a law, otherwise it'll just get shot down straight away. Okay, so that's your laws and your succession covered. Next we're going to very briefly touch on technology. Now it is worthwhile noting I'm currently using a mod for this that adds a little bit more depth to technology, but generally speaking it'll be the same across the board. The higher your technology, you'll get certain bonuses in different stats. So say if you have higher light infantry technology, your light infantry will fight harder. Castle infrastructure, will govern your ability to build stuff in your castle. So things like barracks and walls. Improved keeps is the same, but just for fortifications. Construction improves build cost across the board and will allow you to build certain buildings. But all these technologies can be bought with points, will be built up over time, which will be built up over time based on your learning and other certain skills. So, like say for economy advances, it's your learning plus your stewardship. So that's technology. Generally speaking, it's one of the lesser fleshed out things in this game, but it'll usually just be there ticking away in the background. Generally speaking, the higher you're learning, the faster you'll learn technology. Okay. Next we're going to touch on the military. So this is one of the tabs that you'll be clicking on the most, particularly if you're a warmongering bastard like I like to be. So this can often catch a lot of people off guard if they're not well acquainted with the game. There are three predominant types of units that you'll probably be using in most of your wars. There are levies, retinues, and mercenaries. Those are the 3 predominant types of military types. There are also holy orders, but they're used to a lesser degree and are less common in the game. Generally speaking, you'll be using retinues, levies, and mercenaries for the majority of your feuds with local rulers. Your immediate neighbours. Levies are basically conscripts, effectively. They're troops who come from your lands, they're drafted into service to fight for you. Now, because of the fact that they're basically just dirt farming peasants, they're not that great at fighting, although they potentially can turn the tides of battle in your favour. Particularly early game, you'll be relying very heavily on levies. Now, there are a couple of rules regarding levies which can be a little bit unusual. You cannot declare war on someone if you've already got your levies raised. If you have your levies raised, you will not be able to declare war on someone. You have to raise your levies after you've declared war. Predominantly, the majority of your levies will be coming from your vassals. So these are all the lords that serve you directly. You can raise these by hitting these buttons. The bulk of your army will be probably made up of levies. Once you've raised them, you cannot raise additional levies until you've either lowered them and raised them again, or until they've been entirely wiped out, at which point you can raise them again. Generally speaking, your vassals won't like having their levies raised for long periods of time unless you have a very good reason for doing so. So say if you get invaded, you can keep your vassals' levies raised pretty much indefinitely. If you're doing the invading yourself, they won't be so keen on it. So the longer you have your vassals' levies raised for, the worse your relations will become with them, which can cause complications down the line. Retinues are effectively professional soldiers. These are soldiers that you can personally train up, and they will stick around even after war. You can declare war with retinue standing around. These are more like professional modern soldiers, so more akin to a modern day army where you have a standing army that is available at all times and is always ready for battle. Now you can customize these to a much greater degree. So say we could hire 500 berserkers or 500 pikemen. There are a number of different layouts for these retinues, but they'll always start off, they'll always cap out to being these certain sizes. Now the great benefit of using retinues is that they can flesh out your army with harder troops. A lot of the time, particularly early game, you'll be relying a lot on light infantry and archers. With retinues, you can flesh out your army with some of your tougher troops. So say you can get some more heavy infantry, or berserkers who are really good at just smashing the shit out of people, or cavalry, which are absolutely invaluable at breaking formations and then chasing people down after a battle. Retinues allow you to flesh out these troops to a more customizable degree. In addition to this, they replenish themselves after each battle. After every month, they'll gain more troops in their lines. But they will always cost money. So even when you're out of war, when you're not at war at the time, they will cost money. You can set them to certain degrees of maintenance and strength, but it will still cost you money. Every retinue will start off with only a single man in them. So you cannot, say if you go to war unexpectedly, you cannot raise retinues as a way of immediately getting troops. Retinues are a long-term investment, which will allow you to have more strength at your disposal. Retinues, particularly late game, are one of the more powerful options available to you. Technology will affect how many retinues you can have, along with certain buildings and your number of vassals that you have. Retinues are incredibly powerful, but will often be in quite small numbers. So you'll be relying much more on your levies again. Now, the third predominant type of troops that you'll have at your disposal are mercenaries. So I briefly touched on these guys earlier. These are just hired soldiers. You pay money, they come fight for you. Now, the downside of using mercenaries is that they are often incredibly expensive. So as you can see, to hire the Swedish band, you have to pay upfront 175 gold. We don't even have anything near that amount. In addition to that, for every month that you have them, it will cost you 9 gold a month. So yes, you will get 2,500 men at your disposal, consisting of light infantry, heavy infantry, and berserkers. But it will cost you a shitload of money. Now, comparatively, if you had those same number of troops in levies, it wouldn't cost you a fraction of that. It would cost a very small amount of money. Levies are cheap, retinues are somewhere in between, and mercenaries are expensive as balls. But sometimes you'll just need mercenaries if you need to overwhelm someone with numbers, or if you're on the back foot, you've lost a bunch of levies and you need like immediate reinforcements. Mercenaries can fill that gap. They will always spawn with their full strength, however, they will not have full morale. They'll need a little bit of time to get themselves organised before they're able to fight. It will often take them a month or so before they're fully organised to fight for you. But they can be a very useful way of getting troops ready at short notice, particularly if you have war declared on you and you just need something to defend yourself with. It is worthwhile noting that if you are unable to pay for your mercenaries, they will switch sides on you and often start fighting for your enemy. This can be absolutely disastrous because they will already be in your lands and you will likely be reliant on them. So mercenaries are a bit of a double-edged sword. A small benefit of mercenaries, which I can find could be quite useful, is the fact that you can have mercenaries hired and then be able to declare war on people. Say if I wanted to press my claim over Argyle, I could have mercenaries and my retinue standing by and have them ready to do an initial invasion and then have levies come in later. Or have levies come in if I need them. Potentially I could just rely on retinues and mercenaries, although that would be an incredibly expensive way of declaring war on people. There are also holy orders. At the moment there are no holy orders for my religion group in the game at the moment. But holy orders function like mercenaries. They'll usually have very low upkeep costs and very low initial costs. They'll often cost piety to hire. However, they will not fight for you if you go to war with another nation of your religious group. So if you're a Catholic declaring war on a Catholic and you hire a holy order to fight for you, they will be pissed with you. And it will really damage relations with you. They might not even fight for you. They might join the enemy because they felt that they were hired on ill terms. Generally speaking, you want to hire holy orders to fight heretics and to fight infidels or heathens. So say if you're a lovely Catholic boy and you're at war with a Sunni Muslim, then you can hire a holy order to fight for you. Or if you're fighting a pagan in northern Europe. You use holy orders to fight people of different religion groups to you. Okay, we're now going to touch on decisions and plots. This is found on this tab here. Now this covers a wide variety of things. I have a number of mods enabled which allow me to do different things. But generally speaking, your screen will look somewhat like this. At the top of the screen are your decisions. These are things that you can press a tick button for, and it will do something for you. Important decisions are highlighted in gold, whereas regular decisions are white backgrounded. Now a lot of the time, decisions will have certain prerequisites before you can take them, but generally speaking, decisions can be really important for you. Say at this point in time I had the ability to build an observatory. These show the prerequisites. That I'm not a prisoner, I have a personal wealth of 25 gold, I'm an adult, and I'm not currently feasting, hunting, travelling, or have any other special activity. And it will cost me 25 gold and it will allow me to build an observatory. One of the most important ones, particularly at the start of the game, that you'll want to do is hire a court physician. You can do this every 3 years and allow you to find a physician to serve your lord, your character. That's really, really important if you want to stay alive for long periods of time. Disease will kill you very frequently in this game. Disease is incredibly powerful, incredibly potent, and you'll want to be able to defend against that with a good physician. There are a couple of other minor decisions to make, like inviting people to your court. Promoting commanders gives you, well, better commanders. These cost gold and prestige. You can invite holy men, nobles, and debutantes. Debutantes are basically women that you can marry off. Noblemen are usually stewards, and they'll help you out with managing your money. Holy men are obviously holy men, they'll have high learning skill, and commanders will help you fight. So the decisions. Lastly on this page we have plots. These give you a number of plots that you can do. It allows you to revoke titles and murder people. Generally speaking, the higher your intrigue and the better your relations with people around you, the better your plots will be. The more likely they are to go off without a hitch. Known plots are plots that are going on within your realm that you can intervene with or potentially join. Prisoners are people who are directly imprisoned by you. So if you go to war with people, you'll likely capture a couple of prisoners as you defeat armies or as you besiege provinces. And threats are people who are people building up in your realm, who are usually trying to either change your inheritance type to something that will better suit them, trying to install themselves as a new ruler, or in some other way trying to weaken your power. Threats usually continue on to factions. This is another tab. This will cover all sorts of different things where people are trying to install themselves in a more powerful position or weaken other people's positions in your realm. Even if you're not the chief ruler of the realm, even if you're, say, a count rather than the king, you'll be able to see these factions. You can then join them or try and tackle them as you will. Religion is very important in Crusader Kings. People who are the same religion as you, generally speaking, will be easier to rule. So ideally you want your vassals and your provinces to be the same religion as you. So say if I am a Scottish Catholic ruler, if I were to take a province in, say, I don't know, like the Holy Land with the Crusades coming up, these people are of a different culture and a different religion to me. So say if we click on Jerusalem here, these people are Levantine culture and are Sunni Muslims. Now, this will make this land very, very hard for me to rule because of the fact that I am, one, Catholic, and two, Scottish rather than Levantine. This can add to potential revolts in the future, which isn't fun. Generally speaking, you want people to be of the same religion as you so that you can have better diplomatic relations with them. A thing to briefly touch on with religious authority is the moral authority of your religion. Generally speaking, the higher the moral authority of a religion, the stronger its presence will be in the world. If it has a high moral authority, heresy is much less likely to happen, and you're able to convert provinces at a quicker and more successful rate. The lower your moral authority, you'll be able to convert provinces at a much slower rate, and heresies will be spreading across the board. Heresy, generally speaking, is bad, as heretics will want to be converting your provinces and your rulers, which is not fun. Think the Protestant Reformation, but on a slightly smaller scale. That's not fun, and it can potentially tear apart your nation with a heretical civil war. Okay, the last thing that I'm going to touch on is something that you'll have if you have the Monks and Mystics DLC. That is societies. There are a number of societies that your character will be able to join depending on your religion, predominantly. To see what societies are available to you, you can click on this little button here, list all known societies. Now, societies are like little tiny subgroups which will often give you little benefits and little missions to do alongside your regular rulership. So as a Catholic, I have access to the Benedictine Order, the Dominican Society, the Hermetic Society, and Lucifer's Own. Generally speaking, everyone will have access to the Hermetic Society. This is like the science society. This is where you gain learning, and you're trying to research things for the betterment of mankind. Now, I have two basically monk societies for me to join here, the Dominicans and the Benedictine Orders. They'll have slightly different benefits, like the Benedictine Order will give me benefits to my stewardship and piety at a reduction of my fertility. The same is with the Dominican Order, but with slightly higher learning. Hermetic Society will give me higher learning at temple vassal loss. So those are the societies available. There are also, generally speaking, an evil society you can join. That's Lucifer's Own, in the case of a Christian. So these people are basically just devil worshippers. They can sow an immense amount of chaos in your land. They can often be very, very powerful, but it comes at the risk of potential disfigurement and being able to basically be burnt at the stake for being a devil worshipper. This is one of the things that your court chaplain can do by hunting apostates. This will allow you to find devil worshippers in your lands. Generally speaking, being a devil worshipper can be very, very powerful. It can give you great, great boons, but at the cost of potential disfigurement and traits that can be passed down to your children, which are less than favourable. And also, of course, if you're a vassal of someone, so say if you're a count in someone's kingdom or empire, being a devil worshipper will allow you to be found out and potentially just immediately killed, being burnt at the stake, and that can have negative repercussions on you and, of course, your children if you're branded as a devil worshipper. That's not fun. That's not good. So those societies, they'll often give you little tiny side missions. A lot of the time, which will improve you as a person, although can take time and money away from your character in order to do so. So those societies. We're now going to very briefly touch on de jure claims. These are arguably very important. The term de jure really just means, should be a part of. There are 3 kinds of de jure claims. There is Duke de jure, Kingdom de jure, and Empire de jure. I touched on duchies earlier, so you can see what counties should be part of a duchy by clicking on them here. So generally speaking, the more provinces that you hold in a certain area, it will allow you to form a title if it hasn't been formed, or will allow you to usurp it if it has been formed and you hold more provinces. If you hold more than 50% of a certain area, so say if I want to form the Duchy of Moray, let's say if it wasn't held, I would need to hold Ross, Moray, and Buchan or Catan's. Any one of those, any 3 of those will allow me to form the duchy. If you then have that duchy, and say there's a region outside of your control, so say in this situation where we have the Duchy of Moray currently being held by Duke Malsnicktan, is that how it's pronounced? I don't know. He would be able to declare war on Catan. Here. Or Catness? I'm not sure. I'm terrible with my Scottish. I must sincerely apologise to anyone who lives up in this lovely area of the world. He will be able to say, hey, this area is rightfully part of Moray. I'm going to use this as my way of declaring war on you, because of the fact that it should be part of the Duchy of Moray. Now, counties in duchies will never change. Once they are set like this, this is what they will always, always be. There is no drift. One county will never leave a duchy. It will never leave the de jure grasp of a duchy. So you can always pretty much get more power by holding a duchy and having lands outside of that duchy, which you can then declare war on to seize. De jure kingdoms are slightly more powerful. So as the King of Scotland, I could potentially declare war on any of these provinces in Scotland, in the de jure Kingdom of Scotland, and say, hey, this should be part of the Kingdom of Scotland, so I'm going to use that as my way of declaring war on you. Now, it is worthwhile noting that, say, if the Kingdom of England, if England were to declare war and were to take all of Lothian here, if England were to take all of Lothian and hold it for 100 years, Lothian would no longer be considered part of the Kingdom of Scotland. It would then be considered the part of the Kingdom of England. This is called de jure drift, and this happens over a long period of time after a long period of conquest. Something that is perhaps more that people who are astute of the modern day geography, you'll see that Cornwall here is part of Wales. Now this obviously isn't the case today, but this can be accounted for by de jure drift. If the Kingdom of England holds the Duchy of Cornwall for 100 years, it shall become part of the Kingdom of England. If you take a single county will not drift to a new kingdom. As you can see here, Cumberland is currently owned by the Kingdom of Scotland. But that will not drift unless you have the whole duchy. So if I, as the Kingdom of Scotland, was to take all of Northumbria here, the Duchy of Northumbria, over 100 years, that would drift to become part of the Kingdom of Scotland and become de jure part of it. So that means if England were to take it again, you could use that de jure claim to take it back in the future. Now, one title above kingdom, of course, is an empire. So these are the de jure empires of the world. Once you've formed an empire, you will have basically claim to everything in that region. Everything in that de jure empire. You can declare war and declare de jure war. Again, de jure basically means it should be part of my land. If you are the Emperor of Britannia, say if you held all of Scotland, Wales and England, and you wanted to declare war on Ireland, you could say, well, Ireland should be part of the Empire of Britannia, so I will use that as my reason to declare war. You cannot declare war in this game without something called a Cassis Belly. Now, a Cassis Belly is basically a reason to declare war on someone. You cannot declare war unless you have a Cassis Belly, and choosing your Cassis Belly can be quite tricky, because you want to choose the right one for why you're declaring war. So if I was wanting to go to war with the King of Syria, I can click on declare war up here, and I have a number of reasons why I'll want to declare war. Now bear in mind I do have some mods enabled at the moment which are adding extra Cassis Bellies, so that might be a little bit confusing, and I must apologise for that. But generally speaking, you'll be wanting either de jure claims or claims that you gain from, say, your Chancellor fabricating a claim, which I mentioned earlier. You choose a claim that you wish to press. So say if I wanted to press my claim on the Duchy of Galloway, that would allow me, as the King of Scotland, to say the Duchy of Galloway rightfully belongs to the King of Scotland. So what this would do is start a war between me and the King of Syria, which, to be honest, would be a favourable matchup at this point. He has 1,500 men. I have 2,800 men. So that would probably be quite an easy fight. So if you were, say, playing as the Kingdom of Scotland, or playing as the ruler of Scotland, declaring that war would actually be quite favourable. That would be a favourable matchup for you, because you'd be able to claim a large swath of this land. Now, you most likely wouldn't gain it yourself. You wouldn't own the land yourself. You'd likely gain more people as vassals. So, I'd gain Count Comgal of Carrick as a vassal, and Count Fingal of Galloway as a vassal. So there would be more people for me to govern over. Now, what would likely be the case, because of the fact that these guys here are Scottish rulers, being ruled over by a Norwegian ruler, they would probably be more happy under Scottish rule than under Norwegian rule. That isn't always the case, but generally speaking, if you're of a different culture group to someone, they will not be as happy to be ruled as someone or as someone but with the same culture. Sorry, I'm sorry if I got caught up in my words there. So that covers the declaration of war and de jure rule. That's one of the most important aspects of this game. We're going to finally touch on a couple of little things regarding your character. Regardless of if you have DLC or not, you will have an ambition. This is something that your character is striving towards, and this is something that they want to achieve, and you'll get a bonus for it as a result. So say I have a number of choices here. I could build a war chest, which means that if I acquire a certain amount of money, because of the fact that I'm a kingdom, I need to acquire 700 gold. That's a lot of money. This is really more to symbolise your preparation for war, as the quest dictates there, as the ambition dictates. But if I were to do this, I'll gain 10% increased taxes for 5 years. That's pretty good. An increase in taxes by 10%, that's pretty healthy. That's a healthy amount of money to gain an increase of. So that would really help in an extended war. Say if I was in an extended war with the Kingdom of England, having that extra bit of money coming in would really help. It would mean I could hire more mercenaries, or potentially keep mercenaries for a longer period of time. So ambitions will give you a reward after you meet a certain requirement. So say, become Exalted Amongst Men, gain a prestige of 1,000. Now that's a hard thing to do, potentially. But if you do it, you gain +1 diplomacy, 100 extra prestige, which again will improve your relations with people further, and people gain, all your vassals gain an increase in opinion of you by 5. Again, that's not a huge amount, but it's a nice little increase. So generally speaking, you'll always want to have an ambition going. That's really important. If you have the Way of Life DLC, you can also choose a focus. Now, these are little tiny, almost like roleplay oriented things, which help you determine what your character is focusing on for the next, I believe, 5 years. Say if I go for the family focus, I'll gain +1 to my health. That's really important, means I'm less likely to die of like a disease or something. It gives me +2 to my diplomacy and +25% to my fertility. The higher the fertility you have, the more likely you are to have kids. And of course, having lots of children can be really important for one, securing your succession, to ensure that if, say, one of your heir dies in an accident or whatever, or say if they're adults and they die in battle, having another child is really, really important. In addition to that, any children that you have, you can marry off to other rulers, or potentially rulers in your nation, to your vassals, to improve relations and potentially secure an alliance for future war in the future. Children are very, very important in that way. Now, your children, as they grow up, will need to be raised. If you have, I believe, the Conclave DLC, you can choose a focus for how you want your child to be raised. They'll be focused down a certain route. If you don't have that DLC, you'll be given certain prompts to affect how they're raised. If you yourself are raising your child, if you don't have a court tutor as a minor title, you will be raising the children in your court. Court of people who are actually living in your castle, effectively. So that will often include your children, your wife, and your council. Okay, so if you have a court tutor, you will have less of an effect on your children. But if you, say, have a tutor who has really good stats and your stats are kind of poopy, that can be really important. Like, having a good tutor can be incredibly useful for raising your children. And of course, the better your children are raised, the more powerful of a succession you'll have. So even if my ruler, like my ruler here, his stats aren't great, generally speaking, anything below 10, like let's say 10 is average, anything below 10 isn't great. That's not particularly good. Anything above 10, that's looking a bit more healthy. But generally speaking, these stats here aren't good. So I'll probably want to hire a court tutor who is better at raising people than I am, because goddamn, I don't want my kids to be, not that great like this. Okay, so now that we've touched on that, now that we've touched on raising your children, the basics of stats, of laws and inheritance, we're going to touch on government types now. So there are 4 predominant types of government type. There are more than that, but there are 4 main government types in Western Europe. There are feudal governments, so these are kings and dukes who own castles. This is the most common type of government type in Western Europe. There is a similar government type to this called an Iqta. This is a Muslim government type. It's basically Islamic feudal law. It's very, very similar. So for the sake of this video, I'm going to say that Iqtas and feudals are basically the same. There are republics. So these are government types that are ruled by a city. So these people hold cities, and I believe they can also hold castles. So they're quite powerful in that regard. But rather than having a standard inheritance system, they will have elections. In this situation, I have a republic here, the city of Perth. This is ruled by Mayor Neil of Perth. Now, because of the fact that he is a republic, when he dies, he will be replaced by another random NPC. There are major republics, so like republics that are a county. These will have internal elections held by themselves, but of course that will be determined by the succession type. The more prevalent republics that you'll find are merchant republics. So these include things like the Merchant Republic of Genoa and the Merchant Republic of Venice. These will have special succession types in their nations, usually revolving around great families and ability to rule and things, along with spending a healthy amount of money on making sure that you inherit. But that's a more specialized government type. There are Theocracies. That's another type of government type. That's the third type. These are basically people that run a church or a bishopric. So we've got here Bishop Tag of Dunkeld. So he's the guy that's running my bishop here in Dunkeld. These work somewhat similarly to republics, in which they'll have effectively an election. It's very uncommon for, at least in the Christian religion group, for bishops to be able to have children and inherit, from their children, have their children inherit from them. It's more common for them to be replaced by another bishop. Now again, depending on your crown law, you can choose who can you can choose who will succeed a certain bishop, or you can have the Pope choose for you based on your crown law, depending on investiture. The fourth sort of main government type are tribes. Now, tribes at this point in the game are much less common. They're predominantly just in Northern Europe. But these function pretty similarly to feudal rulership, except for the fact that you're limited in terms of what succession types you can have, and you're limited to a tribe. Now, a tribe, frankly, is just a shitty castle. Now, a tribe has the flexibility of being able to choose what government type they lean towards. Depending on the upgrades that they build in their tribe, they can lean towards either becoming a merchant republic or becoming a feudal state. They cannot choose to become a theocracy. Ideally, if you are a tribe, you'll be wanting to move towards a feudal or republic society. Being a tribe is really bad for long-term rulership due to the fact that you are limited to Gavelkind succession, which I talked about earlier, where your land is divided amongst your children. This can be really, really painful and difficult to deal with if you're trying to manage a long-term kingdom. However, there are some benefits of being a tribe, like the ability to raid people. This is when you raise troops and send them across the border to basically loot and pillage nearby nations. This can sometimes provoke a hostile response and will deteriorate your relations with that kingdom or duchy or whatever you border, but it can bring you back very precious money for, say, preparing to invade another area. Generally speaking, tribes will be very poor and will not be able to sustain themselves well on their own. Then they'll be very reliant on raiding. There is a fifth government type, nomadic government. So say like the Kagan of Kumania here. These are basically horse lords. I'm going to put it bluntly, I actually don't know so much about nomads. They don't really have holdings, if I recall correctly. They just have these small holdings. They function a little bit similarly to tribes, but generally speaking, nomads don't stick around so well. They can potentially take vast swaths of land, but just like a Gavelkind succession, they will very quickly shatter unless they establish themselves as a long-term nation by switching to a feudal system, but that usually won't happen with nomadic government types. But again, I am not so well versed with nomadic government types, so I don't know whether or not the information I can give will be particularly effective. Okay, I think that pretty much covers all of the basics when it comes to playing Crusader Kings 2. I know this has been a remarkably long video, I must apologise for that, but this game is very deep and requires a lot of playing to get to grips with. I probably encourage you to play the tutorial as well, even though it isn't great. I'd also encourage you to check out some other people's videos on Crusader Kings 2, but this has just been a short rundown of the basics of Crusader Kings. I hope that you found this video useful. If you did like this video, do feel free to leave a like and a comment if I got anything wrong, because I'm absolutely certain that I have got some things wrong. So if you saw anything that I made a mistake about, please do correct me. There's only one way I'm going to find out where I went wrong. So I thank you all very much for watching, and I hope that you enjoy ruling over your realms in the future. Best of luck, everyone. Bye bye.